You have 72 hours to remove that illegal structure, or I will have it demolished, and I will bill you for every last cent. That was the first time Carol threatened my wife's memory. It wouldn't be the last. Let me back up. My name is Arthur, and I'm a structural engineer. For 30 years, my life was built around two things: the elegant certainty of load-bearing calculations and the chaotic, beautiful whirlwind that was my wife, Elena. She was a meteorologist, a woman who saw the world not as solid ground but as a magnificent, swirling system of pressure and flow. She found stories in the clouds, poetry in isobars. I built bridges to defy gravity. She charted the invisible forces that ruled the sky. We were a perfect, balanced equation. Then, she was gone. A fight with cancer that no amount of science or love could win. The silence in our old house became a physical weight, a structural flaw I couldn't fix. So I sold it. I bought a smaller place in a quiet, manicured neighborhood called Willow Creek Estates. It promised peace, a place where the background noise of life was just the hum of lawnmowers and the distant laughter of kids. It was supposed to be a place to grieve, to heal, to exist in the quiet space she'd left behind. Before she died, Elena had been planning her dream project, a small, personal weather station. Not a cheap plastic thing from a big box store, but a proper, semi-professional setup. She'd already ordered most of the components, her eyes lighting up as she described the anemometer, the tipping bucket rain gauge, the Stevenson screen she wanted me to build to house the sensitive thermometers. A perfect little house for my instruments, she'd called it. After she passed, the boxes sat in the garage of my new house like unopened grief. For months, I couldn't touch them. Then, one Saturday, I did. Building it felt like having one last conversation with her. I followed her meticulous notes, my engineer's hands assembling her scientist's dream. The structure itself was small, no bigger than a large doghouse, built of sturdy cedar with a white slatted screen for ventilation. It was a precise, functional, and, I thought, rather handsome little building. I situated it in the back corner of my yard, where it had a clear view of the sky. I registered it with the National Weather Service's Cooperative Observer Program, just as she had planned. It was now an official data point, a tiny, unsleeping sentinel contributing to the vast web of information she had so loved. It was more than a shed, it was a memorial. It was the last thing Elena and I would ever build together. And that's when I met Carol. She was the Homeowners Association president, a title she wore like a crown of thorns she expected everyone else to feel pricked by. Carol was a woman who seemed to vibrate with a low-frequency rage. She had a sharp, angular face and hair sprayed into a helmet of improbable rigidity. Her voice was a tool she used to chip away at other people's peace of mind. I first saw her marching up my newly laid sod driveway, a clipboard clutched in her hand like a weapon. "Arthur, is it?" she asked, not waiting for an answer. Her eyes scanned my property, her gaze lingering on a misplaced garden hose and a single dandelion with the accusatory intensity of a prosecutor spotting a fatal flaw in an alibi. "Yes," I said, keeping my voice even. "And you are?" "I am Carol, the president of this HOA," she announced. The way she said it implied I should have already known, perhaps should have been born knowing. "I'm here about the structure." She gestured vaguely toward my backyard. My heart sank. I knew exactly what she meant. "The weather station?" I asked. "I don't care if it's a station to Mars," she snapped, her voice cracking like thin ice. "It is an unapproved outbuilding. It violates Section 7, Subsection C, Paragraph 4 of the Willow Creek Covenants. No sheds, shacks, or temporary structures of any kind shall be erected without prior written approval from the Architectural Review Committee." She recited the rule from memory, a zealot quoting scripture. I tried to be reasonable. I was new here. I didn't want trouble. I just wanted quiet. "I understand, Carol," I said calmly. "But it's not really a shed. It's a piece of scientific equipment. It's quite small, and it's for a personal project. I couldn't bring myself to say it was for my dead wife. It felt too sacred to offer up to this woman's judgment." "A project," she sneered. The word sounded dirty in her mouth. "Mister, your projects are not my concern. The rules are my concern. You will receive an official violation notice in the mail. You have 14 days to remove it. Good day." She turned on her heel and marched away, her back as rigid as her hairdo. I stood there on my new lawn, the smell of fresh-cut grass suddenly feeling cloying and artificial. The peace I had sought in this neighborhood felt like a cheap facade, cracking under the first bit of pressure. The initial annoyance was a low hum, like a transformer about to blow. I had dealt with difficult clients, stubborn city inspectors, and prima donna architects my entire career. I could handle a power-tripping HOA president. I decided to follow the proper channels. I wrote a polite letter to the Architectural Review Committee, which I suspected was just Carol and a few of her cronies. I explained the purpose of the station, its minimal footprint, and its official designation. I included a copy of its registration with the NWS. I even offered to plant a nice shrubbery around it if aesthetics were the concern. I was seeking compromise, a reasonable solution. The response I got was a form letter with my request denied, and a second violation notice, this time with a $50 fine attached. The hum of annoyance grew louder. Fine. I requested a hearing at the next monthly HOA meeting. I would present my case in person. I was a man of logic, of facts and figures. Surely, a room full of my neighbors would see the absurdity of this. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a sterile room that smelled of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. Carol sat at the head of a long table, flanked by two other board members who looked either terrified of her or completely bored. About a dozen residents were scattered in the folding chairs. When my turn came, I stood up and calmly laid out my case. I explained Elena's passion. I talked about the Cooperative Observer Program and the value of citizen science. I showed them the registration documents. I tried to connect with them as neighbors. It's a tribute to my late wife, I said, my voice catching slightly. It's a way for me to feel connected to her, and it contributes useful data that benefits the public. It is harmless. I thought I saw a few sympathetic looks. But Carol was having none of it. Mister, we are not here to discuss your personal sob stories, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. We are here to discuss the rules. The rules you agreed to when you bought your house. The rule says no sheds. That thing is a shed. It's a Stevenson screen housing meteorological instruments, I countered, keeping my tone level. By definition, it is not a shed, which is a structure used for storage or as a workshop. Are you a lawyer? She shot back. No, I'm an engineer. I believe in precise definitions. Well, I believe in enforcing the covenants that protect our property values, she declared to the room, her voice rising. If we let one person build an illegal shack, what's next? People parking their boats in the driveway. Painting their houses purple. It's a slippery slope. Your appeal is denied. Pay the fine. She slammed a cheap plastic gavel on the table. It was pure theater, and it was infuriating. The frustration was no longer a hum, it was a buzzing in the air, like static before a lightning strike. I saw then that reason was not a language Carol spoke. She spoke only the language of power, of dominance. The fines kept coming, doubling with each notice. $100. $200. Letters started appearing in my mailbox, written in an aggressive, capitalized font, threatening liens on my property. She started posting thinly veiled warnings on the community Facebook page about unauthorized structures and the importance of vigilance to maintain neighborhood standards. My neighbors, who had been friendly and welcoming at first, now offered only tight-lipped smiles and averted their eyes. I was being isolated, painted as a problem. The conflict was escalating in a way that felt completely disproportionate. It was a war over a 4x4-foot wooden box. But it wasn't about the box anymore. It was about her need to win, to crush any dissent. And for me, it was about defending the last piece of my wife I had left. The turning point came on a rainy Tuesday. I was at work, trying to focus on a seismic retrofitting project, when I got a notification from the new security camera I'd installed overlooking the weather station. I had a bad feeling. The live feed loaded on my phone. There she was. Carol. In my backyard. She was accompanied by two large men from a local landscaping company I recognized from the trucks that serviced the neighborhood's common areas. Carol was pointing at the weather station, her face a mask of vindictive glee. One of the men was holding a crowbar. My blood ran cold. This was no longer about fines or letters. This was a direct physical threat to my property, to Elena's memorial. I grabbed my keys, told my boss I had a family emergency, and raced home, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. I called the police on the way, my voice tight with a rage I hadn't felt in years. When I screeched into my driveway, the two men were hesitating, looking uncertain. Carol was goading them on. The HOA has authorized its removal. Get it done. Get off my property. I roared, slamming my car door. Carol spun around, a flicker of surprise in her eyes before it was replaced by pure defiance. This is HOA business. This structure is in violation. This is private property, and you are trespassing, I said, walking towards them, my phone still in my hand, recording. And you are about to illegally destroy my property. The police are on their way. The mention of the police made the two men drop their tools and back away. We don't want no trouble, ma'am, one of them mumbled to Carol. She shot them a look of pure venom before turning her fury back on me. You think you can stop this? I run this neighborhood. I will put a lien on this house so fast your head will spin. I will own you. Just then, a police car pulled up to the curb. A calm, tired-looking officer got out. That was the moment everything shifted. The moment the engineer in me, the men who built things to withstand immense pressure, took over. The grief-stricken husband receded, and the strategist emerged. I was no longer interested in compromise. I was no longer seeking peace. I had tried reason. I had tried procedure. Carol had responded by bringing a crowbar. She had just declared war. And I was going to finish it. The officer listened patiently to both of us. Carol launched into a hysterical tirade about HOA rules and my flagrant disregard for them. I calmly showed the officer the video on my phone of her entering my locked back gate and ordering her men to destroy the station. I explained it was federally registered scientific equipment. The officer, to his credit, saw it for what it was, a civil dispute escalating into criminal action. He issued Carol a formal warning for trespassing and advised her that any attempt to remove or damage the structure would result in her arrest. He told her all future communication had to go through legal channels. She was seething, her face pale with fury. As the officer left, she gave me a look of such concentrated hatred it was almost impressive. It was the look of a tyrant who had just been told no for the first time in a very long time. This isn't over, she hissed, her voice low and menacing. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Oh, I think I'm beginning to, I said, my voice quiet and cold. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my office, the blueprints for a new commercial building spread out on my desk, but I wasn't seeing them. I was designing something else. A new project. I decided to call it Project Tempest. Its objective was simple, the complete and total dismantlement of Carol's petty empire. The first phase was investigation. A structure is only as strong as its foundation. I was going to find the cracks in hers. I started with the HOA's governing documents, which I had received in a thick binder when I bought the house. I read every single line of the covenants, conditions, and restrictions. I read the bylaws. I read the minutes from the last 5 years of meetings. It was drier than a bag of cement mix, but I treated it like a structural analysis. I was looking for stresses, for inconsistencies, for points of failure. I found the first one in the section about vendor contracts. It stipulated that any contract over $5,000 required a minimum of 3 competitive bids. It was standard practice. Then I looked at the HOA's annual budgets, which were available on the community website. I went through the expense reports line by line. And there it was, a glaring anomaly. The landscaping contract. It was for $60,000 a year, paid to a company called Willow Creek Landscaping. It was the single largest expenditure in the budget, and it had been awarded to the same company for the last 6 years without any record of a bidding process in the meeting minutes. My pulse quickened. This was more than just sloppy management. This was a red flag the size of a billboard. A quick search of the state's business registry told me everything I needed to know. The sole proprietor of Willow Creek Landscaping was one Carol Peterson. She was paying herself with our HOA dues. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. She was using her position as president to award a bloated, no-bid contract to her own company. This wasn't just a violation of the bylaws, this was almost certainly illegal. Embezzlement. Fraud. The foundation wasn't just cracked, it was rotten to the core. Now I needed more than just public records. I needed an ally. I thought of my next-door neighbor, Frank. He was a retired police detective, a quiet man who spent most of his days tending his rose bushes. He'd been polite but distant since the trouble started, but I'd seen the way he watched Carol at the HOA meetings, with a look of weary appraisal that I now understood. He'd seen her type before. I went over to his house the next morning with a peace offering of coffee and donuts. We sat on his back patio, surrounded by the scent of his prize-winning roses. "Frank," I started, "I need some advice. And it's not about gardening." He gave me a small, knowing smile. "It's about our queen, isn't it?" I laid it all out for him. The harassment, the trespassing, and my discovery about the landscaping contract. He listened intently, his detective's eyes missing nothing. When I was done, he let out a long, slow whistle. "I knew she was a piece of work," he said, shaking his head. "But I didn't think she was a crook. That's a felony, son. Conflict of interest, self-dealing, embezzlement, a prosecutor would have a field day with this." "But I need proof," I said. "I have the public records, but I need to prove she's intentionally overcharging the HOA. I need to see her company's books, compare them to the invoices she's submitting." "That's the tricky part," Frank said, steepling his fingers. "That requires a subpoena. You need law enforcement to get involved for that. And they won't move without a very solid case." He was right. I had a strong suspicion, but I needed something more. I needed to set a trap. I needed to bait Carol into making another mistake, one that was so undeniable it would force the authorities to act. Phase 2 of Project Tempest began to take shape in my mind. It was an engineering problem, after all. You apply a controlled amount of stress to a system to expose its weakest point. Carol's weakest point was her arrogance. Her belief that she was untouchable. I went back to my office and drafted a formal, certified letter to the HOA board. I wasn't writing as a resident anymore. I was writing as a structural engineer representing his own interests. The letter was a masterpiece of cold, legal precision. I cited the specific federal statutes protecting nationally registered weather observation posts. I detailed the penalties for tampering with such equipment, which included hefty fines and potential prison time. I included a notarized copy of the NWS registration. Then, I added the bait. I stated that due to the recent incident of trespassing and attempted property damage, I had installed a comprehensive, high-definition security system. I informed them that any further unauthorized presence on my property would be documented in crystal-clear video and audio and would be turned over to the authorities as evidence in any subsequent criminal or civil proceedings. Finally, I concluded by formally requesting, under the provisions of the HOA bylaws, a complete, unredacted copy of all financial records for the past 7 years, including all vendor contracts and invoices, specifically pertaining to the landscaping services. I cited the bylaw that gave every homeowner the right to inspect the association's financial records. I knew this letter would be like throwing a lit match into a bucket of gasoline. Her ego couldn't handle being challenged so directly and formally. And the request for the financial records would send her into a panic. Panicked people make mistakes. I sent the letter via certified mail, return receipt requested. The trap was set. The next few days were quiet. Eerily so. It was the calm before the storm, and my weather station sensors confirmed it. Barometric pressure was dropping fast. I checked the feed from my security cameras obsessively. I had installed 3 of them, covering every angle of the station and the approach from the gate. They were small, discreet, and powerful. The signed receipt for the certified letter came back. She had it. The clock was ticking. The explosion came on a Friday night. It was just after 10 o'clock. I was reading in my living room when my phone buzzed with a motion alert. My heart hammered. This was it. I pulled up the live feed. There she was, a shadowy figure slipping through my back gate. She was dressed in dark clothes, but the infrared camera captured her face perfectly. It was Carol. She was alone this time. In her hand, she was carrying a can of spray paint. She approached the weather station like a predator stalking its prey. She looked around furtively, convinced she was unseen. Then, she shook the can and began to spray paint a single word across the clean white slats of the Stevenson screen. Illegal. I watched, my breath held, a feeling of cold, clinical satisfaction washing over me. It was perfect. Better than I could have hoped. Vandalism. Willful destruction of property. And I had it all in glorious 4K resolution. But she wasn't done. After defacing the structure, she pulled a piece of paper from her pocket and tacked it to the door. It was another violation notice, but this one was different. It was handwritten, scrawled in a furious script. It declared that the structure would be forcibly removed in 48 hours by order of the HOA president. She was digging her own grave, and I was just quietly handing her the shovel. After she left, I went outside. The acrid smell of spray paint hung in the cool night air. I looked at the ugly black word marring the memorial to my wife, and I didn't feel anger. I felt resolve. This was the evidence I needed. This was the stress test that had revealed the fatal flaw. The next HOA meeting was a week later. The atmosphere in the clubhouse was tense. My letter had clearly been circulated among the board, and the request for financial records had stirred something up. People were whispering. Carol called the meeting to order, her face a tight mask of composure, but I could see the strain around her eyes. She breezed through the agenda, trying to get to the end of the meeting as quickly as possible. But I was waiting. When she opened the floor for new business, I stood up. "I have a matter to discuss," I said, my voice echoing in the quiet room. "It concerns the ongoing issue of my property and the recent actions of our president." Carol's eyes narrowed. "That matter is closed," she snapped. "You are in violation. That is the end of it." "Actually, it's not," I said. I pulled a small laptop and a portable projector from my bag. "I have a short presentation." A murmur went through the room. Carol's face went from strained to thunderous. "This is not on the agenda. You are out of order." "I believe this falls under the category of safety and security of the community," I said, quoting from the meeting's agenda. Specifically, the issue of an HOA board member committing criminal acts against a resident. Before she could stop me, I had the projector running. The image of my pristine weather station appeared on the wall. Then, I hit play. The room was silent as they watched the grainy, night vision video of their HOA president, dressed like a cat burglar, sneaking onto my property. A collective gasp went through the audience as she raised the can of spray paint. The sharp hiss of the aerosol can was perfectly audible from my camera's microphone. When the video ended, I switched the image to a high-resolution photo of the damage, the word illegal, stark and ugly. I turned to face the room. This is what our president does when she thinks no one is watching. She trespasses. She vandalizes. She makes threats. Is this the kind of leadership this community wants? Carol was on her feet, her face a mottled red and white. "That's a lie. That video is fake. It's doctored. He's a tech wizard, he could have faked it. He's been harassing me. He's trying to ruin me." Her denial was too loud, too hysterical. She was losing control, and everyone could see it. She started screaming at me, calling me a liar, a troublemaker. She threatened to sue me for defamation, for slander, for everything she could think of. It was a spectacular meltdown. But it wasn't enough. The community was shocked, yes. Her credibility was cracked. But she still held the power. The other board members, her loyal lapdogs, quickly moved to adjourn the meeting amidst the chaos. She wasn't out. Not yet. I had exposed her as a petty criminal. Now I had to expose her as a felon. Cornered animals are the most dangerous. I knew Carol's reaction to her public humiliation wouldn't be to back down. It would be to attack. And she did, with a viciousness that surprised even me. The smear campaign started the next day. She used the private community Facebook group as her personal burn book. Posts appeared accusing me of being an unstable, aggressive man. She claimed I had threatened her. She twisted the story of the meeting, painting me as an unhinged bully who used deceptively edited videos to attack a defenseless woman. Then she escalated. She started whispering to neighbors that my weather station wasn't what it seemed. That all the antennas and wires were for spying. She hinted that I was some kind of government agent, or worse, a pervert using cameras to watch their children. It was vile. It was baseless. And it was terrifyingly effective. The friendly waves from neighbors stopped completely. Parents would hurry their kids inside when I pulled into my driveway. I was becoming a pariah on my own street. The next blow was aimed at my livelihood. She found out where I worked. She called the managing partner of my engineering firm and filed a formal complaint. She accused me of unethical conduct, of using my technical skills to harass and stalk her. She claimed I was mentally unstable and a potential liability to the firm. My boss, a good man I had known for 20 years, called me into his office. He looked pained. "Arthur, I know this is nonsense," he said. "But we have to take any complaint like this seriously. I have to put you on administrative leave until our legal department can sort this out." I felt the floor drop out from under me. She was trying to ruin me. Professionally, personally. This was no longer about a shed or HOA rules. This was an attempt to destroy my life. The vindictive satisfaction I had felt was replaced by a cold, hard anger. She had crossed a line from which there was no return. I was sitting at home, suspended from my job, feeling completely isolated, when my phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Is this Arthur?" a man's voice asked, low and hesitant. "Yes." "Who is this?" "You don't know me," the voice said. "My name is Dave. I'm Carol's brother-in-law. Or, I was. My sister divorced her brother years ago." I sat up straight. "Okay, Dave. What can I do for you?" "It's what I can do for you," he said. "I saw the video. Someone sent it to me. I know what she's like. She did the same thing to me. Ruined my reputation. Forced me out of a business we started together." My mind was racing. "What business?" "A landscaping company," he said. "Willow Creek Landscaping." My heart began to pound. This was it. The whistleblower. The final piece of the puzzle. "She cheated me," Dave continued, his voice thick with years of resentment. "Cooked the books, accused me of stealing when she was the one skimming off the top. I couldn't prove it then. But I kept some things. I kept the real ledgers from the first few years. Before she got good at hiding it." "Dave," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Do you still have those ledgers?" "I do," he said. "I've been holding onto them for a decade, waiting for the right time. I think this is it. She can't be allowed to keep doing this to people. I'll meet you. I'll give you everything I have." We met an hour later in a quiet coffee shop miles from our neighborhood. Dave was a tired-looking man with honest eyes. He slid a thick accordion file across the table. "Here it is," he said. "The real books on the left, and copies of the falsified ones she submitted for taxes on the right. You can see the discrepancies. She was bidding jobs at one price, billing the clients for that, but recording a much lower number in the official books and pocketing the difference. With the HOA, it's even worse. She's not just skimming, she's inventing charges. Emergency tree removal, 4 trees that never fell. Seasonal replanting with cheap annuals she charges as expensive perennials. It's all there." I opened the file. It was a treasure trove. Meticulously kept records of a long and systematic fraud. The numbers were damning. Over 6 years, I calculated she had defrauded the Willow Creek Estates HOA of over $100,000. This was the smoking gun. This was the key. This was no longer a civil matter for the local police. This was a felony case for the state. The next morning, I walked into the state attorney general's office. I didn't have an appointment. I just had a briefcase. In that briefcase was a laptop with the video of Carol's vandalism, a copy of Dave's ledgers, my analysis of the HOA's financials, and a detailed, chronological report of the harassment, including the attempt to get me fired. I didn't get a junior assistant. My evidence was so organized, so compelling, that I was ushered into a meeting with a senior investigator from the Economic Crimes Unit within an hour. He was a man named Mr. Harris, a sharp, no-nonsense professional. He reviewed my evidence in silence, his expression unreadable. When he was done, he looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw a glimmer of a smile. "Mister," he said, "you've done our job for us. This is one of the most well-documented citizen complaints I have ever seen. We'll be opening a formal investigation into Mr. Peterson immediately. What happens now? I asked. Now, Harris said, leaning forward, we let her continue to think she's winning. She's called another special HOA meeting, hasn't she? To vote on putting a lien on your house. I nodded. Next Tuesday. Good, he said. Let the meeting happen. We'll have a few people there, in the audience. Let her have her moment. Let her feel like she's about to deliver the final blow. It's always better when they incriminate themselves a little more, right before the end. The plan was audacious. It was theatrical. It was perfect poetic justice. The night of the special meeting, the clubhouse was packed. Word had spread. This was the final showdown between the HOA president and the neighborhood pariah. The air was thick with tension. I saw Frank, the retired cop, give me a subtle nod from the back of the room. I also saw two men and a woman I didn't recognize, dressed in casual clothes, sitting quietly, observing. Investigator Harris's team. Carol stood at the podium, basking in the attention. She looked triumphant. She believed she had won. She had smeared my name, threatened my job, and now she was going to take my house. She launched into her speech, her voice filled with self-righteous fury. She painted me as a monster, a threat to the community's safety and property values. She held up a sheaf of papers. This is the final notice of lien, she declared. We have followed every procedure, and he has refused to comply. Therefore, I call for a vote to place a lien on his property for the amount of the unpaid fines, plus legal fees, and for the immediate, forcible removal of the illegal structure at his expense. She looked directly at me, a cruel, triumphant smile on her face. Do I have a motion? Her cronies on the board quickly motioned and seconded. She was about to call the vote. Before you do that, I said, standing up. My voice was calm, but it cut through the room. I believe the homeowners are entitled to hear all the facts before they vote to take a man's home. Carol's smile vanished. You are out of order. You have no right to speak. Oh, I think I do, I said. I walked to the front of the room, and this time, I didn't need a projector. I had something better. You've all heard Carol's story, I began, addressing the crowd. Now I'd like to tell you mine. It's a story about abuse of power. It's a story about fraud. It's a story about the theft of over $100,000 of your money. A shocked gasp rippled through the room. Carol's face went white. He's lying, she shrieked. He has no proof. Don't I? I said. I turned to the back of the room. Dave. Would you care to join me? Dave, Carol's brother-in-law, stood up and walked to the front. The sight of him seemed to suck all the air out of Carol's lungs. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. Many of you don't know me, Dave said, his voice shaking slightly but clear. I was Carol's business partner. And I am here to tell you that for the last 6 years, she has been systematically defrauding this community. She used her position as president to award an exclusive, overpriced contract to her own company, and then she billed you for work that was never done. I passed out copies of a single sheet of paper I had prepared. On one side was an invoice from Willow Creek Landscaping to the HOA for $10,000 for emergency storm cleanup from last March. On the other side was a certified meteorological report from the National Weather Service, data gathered, in part, by my own station, showing that there had been no significant storms in our area during that entire month. The highest wind gust was 15 miles per hour. This is just one example, I said, my voice resonating with cold fury. One of dozens. She has been stealing from all of you, year after year, hiding behind the bylaws she claims to hold so sacred. The room erupted. People were shouting, looking at their HOA bills, the pieces clicking into place. Carol was backed against the wall, her eyes darting around, looking for an escape. She was trapped. It's all lies, she screamed, her voice cracking into a hysterical sob. He's a criminal. He put this all together to frame me. Dave is a disgruntled failure who's trying to get back at me. She lunged, not at me, but at Dave, her hands clawed, trying to scratch at his face. You snake. I'll kill you. And that's when Investigator Harris and his team stood up. Carol Peterson, Harris said, his voice booming over the chaos. His badge was suddenly visible, hanging from a chain around his neck. "You are under arrest for embezzlement, wire fraud, and witness tampering." The entire room fell into a stunned silence. The transformation on Carol's face was terrifying. The mask of the righteous community leader dissolved completely, revealing the snarling, cornered creature beneath. Her eyes, wide with panic and rage, finally locked onto mine. As one of the other agents put her hands behind her back and snapped the handcuffs into place, she never broke my gaze. The sound of the metal clicking shut was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. "You'll regret this," she shrieked, her voice raw and ragged as they began to lead her away. "I'll own you. I'll see you in the ground." It was her last, impotent threat. A hollow echo in a room full of her victims who now knew the truth. No one was afraid of her anymore. She was just a common thief, stripped of her power, her reign of terror over. The aftermath was swift and decisive. The news of Carol's arrest spread through Willow Creek like a wildfire, burning away the fear and suspicion she had so carefully cultivated. The 2 board members who had been her puppets resigned in disgrace the next day. An emergency election was held, and Frank, the retired detective, was unanimously voted in as the new HOA president. His first act was to call a special meeting, not for a vote, but for an apology. He apologized to me on behalf of the community. He then led a motion to void every fine Carol had ever issued against me and to formally add a bylaw amendment exempting scientific and educational equipment from the outbuilding clause. It passed without a single dissenting vote. Carol's legal downfall was just as complete. Faced with the mountain of evidence Dave and I had provided, she was convicted on multiple felony counts. The judge, citing her remorseless attitude and the gross abuse of her community's trust, sentenced her to 5 years in state prison. Her company was dissolved, and the court ordered her to pay full restitution to the HOA, forcing the sale of her house and liquidating all her assets. She lost everything. My life returned to a quiet I hadn't realized was possible. My boss called me the day after the arrest, apologized profusely, and reinstated me with back pay and a bonus for my troubles. The neighbors who had shunned me now came by one, to offer their own apologies. They brought pies and bottles of wine. They asked about the weather station. It became a small point of pride in the neighborhood. Kids would come by with their parents, and I'd show them the instruments, explaining how the anemometer measured the wind and how the rain gauge worked. I put up a small, elegant plaque next to it. The Elena Weather Station. For the love of the sky. Sometimes, in the evenings, I would sit on my back porch and just look at it, the little white house standing sentinel in the fading light. It was no longer just a memorial. It was a symbol. A symbol of resilience. A symbol of the fact that bullies, no matter how loud or powerful they seem, are just structures built on faulty foundations. And with enough patience, with enough precision, you can find the flaws, apply the right pressure, and watch them crumble to dust. I had come to Willow Creek Estate seeking peace, a quiet place to heal. Instead, I found a war I didn't ask for. But in fighting it, in standing up not just for myself but for an entire community, I found something more valuable than peace. I found purpose again. The air in the neighborhood felt different now. Cleaner. The low-frequency buzz of Carol's tyranny was gone, replaced by the gentle hum of a community healing, of neighbors talking to each other again over fences, of children laughing freely. And my little weather station continued its silent, faithful work, measuring the pressure and the temperature, charting the winds, and sending its data out into the world. It was a quiet testament to a woman who loved the sky, and a reminder that even in the face of a storm, a well-built structure, founded on truth and love, will always, always stand. Justice, I learned, is a force of nature, just like the weather. It can be slow to build, but when the storm finally breaks, it is absolute.